I'll let you know when you can introduce the first speaker.
Okay.
Okay, Becky, you can go ahead and begin.
Good evening, and welcome to tonight's North Dakota for Clean Water, Wildlife, and Parks Town Hall. I'm Becky Jones-Malum, and I'm in Bismarck. I'm originally from Devils Lake, a fourth-generation North Dakotan, and I'm going to be your moderator tonight. I have with me Steve Adair, who is the campaign chairman, and Eric Rosenquist, who is with the sponsoring committee. We also have tonight Al Geisen, who's one of our super volunteers. Now, tonight we're going to discuss the latest on Measure 5, which of course is the Clean Water, Wildlife, and Parks measure, which would improve the quality of our water, protect North Dakotans from floods, and create more areas for us to enjoy our beautiful state outdoors. Now, to ask a question tonight, you can press 0 on your telephone keyboard, and then you'll be connected directly to one of our volunteer operators. Again, press 0 to ask a question. I'm first going to introduce and speak to you Steve Adair, who's our campaign chairman. Steve's going to talk a little bit about the measure and why it would be beneficial to North Dakota. Steve?
Yes, thank you, Becky, and thanks to all of you for joining us here tonight. Our great state is changing rapidly. We are losing grasslands at rates that we have not seen since the days of the Dust Bowl. Our communities are plagued with chronic battles with flooding. And we're also dealing with the impacts of one of the largest oil fields in the entire world. These changes threaten our clean drinking water. They threaten the health of our lakes, rivers, and streams, and ultimately all of us. And while we all recognize the magnitude of these challenges, this measure is really all about focusing on solutions. Our current prosperity in North Dakota gives us a unique opportunity to address these challenges in a bold and thoughtful way. By setting aside a small percentage of oil tax revenue into a granting fund to maintain our clean water, to enhance our fish and wildlife habitat, to provide our communities more tools for flood control, and to provide places for outdoor recreations for our families and our children, we can have both a strong economy and a great quality of life. And we can do all this without raising taxes on anyone and with a strong and accountable partnership between our citizens and our elected officials. We are fortunate to have the financial resources to conserve our land and water on which we all depend and to address the needs that our state has for infrastructure and education. We can and should do both of these things. And now I'll send it back to Becky.
All right. Thank you, Steve. Now, I just want to remind people, if you would like to ask a question, press 0, and you'll be connected directly with one of our volunteer operators. I want to now introduce Eric Rosenquist, who is with our sponsoring committee, and Eric's going to tell us a little bit more about the measure and what you can do to help. Eric?
Yeah, thanks, Becky. Well, progress on the campaign. So far, we introduced over 41,000 signatures to the Secretary of State office, thanks to many hardworking volunteers. Those signatures have been accepted, and this measure is now on the ballot as Measure 5. So on November 4th, we'll have the opportunity to approve Measure 5. We're in the part of the campaign right now where we're reaching out to voters, and we're trying to educate voters on what this measure is about. And that's one place we could use the help of you guys on the phone, the supporters of our conservation groups. We need volunteers to write letters to the editor. We need contributions. We can use volunteers to place phone calls, and also just talk to your neighbors to raise their awareness and educate them of what this measure is about. So with that, I will kick it back to Becky, please.
Great, thank you. And so we're going to ask you now, those of you on the phone, are you willing to commit or talk to your friends and neighbors about voting for measure number 5? It's just a simple poll for you. Press 1 if you will volunteer. Press 2 if you'll talk to your friends and family about voting for Measure 5. Press 3 if you'll talk to your coworkers about voting for Measure 5. Press 4 to commit to do all 3. Now remember, if you want to ask a question, press 0. But again, if you're willing to volunteer, press 1. Press 2 if you'll talk to your friends and family. Press 3 if you'll talk to your coworkers about voting for Measure 5. Or press 4 to commit to doing all of those. Now, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 0 for that question. Steve, I want to bring back to you a question that comes up from folks too. What are some of the things that you could do with this measure for North Dakota?
Well, this really would give us great opportunities, Becky, to make up for some of the loss of CRP and grassland that we've seen across our state. One idea is to design our own conservation cover program. So as North Dakotans, we could create a program that would pay landowners to put their land in a conservation cover that could be flexible as far as the use of that land for haying and grazing, and they could pay market rates for that land as opposed to the conservation, the federal program that no longer is able to keep up with our economy. So that would be a tremendous boost to wildlife populations in the state, to protecting our clean water and taking care of many of those things that we care about. You know, a growing issue is also the quality of our water in this state. We've been blessed for years to have great drinking water, but as we intensify our land uses in both the west and eastern part of our state, our water is becoming more challenged by those inputs. This measure would allow us to put grassland and wetland buffers around our drinking water sources and really offer a way to purify our drinking water before it reaches our rivers, lakes, and streams, and that this can really give us a long-term solution to making sure we maintain our clean water in this state.
Okay, thank you, Steve. We are going to go to a caller. I have Donald from Bismarck. Go ahead, Donald.
Yeah. Well, I'm wondering why we need to pass this money for extra funds when we have the State Water Commission, we have water entities. I was 20 years on Southwest Water Board, getting water to people with that need it, with decent water, and why we are doing this, because we have great wetlands and that type of stuff now. I know we've lost some stuff to CRP, but that's going to happen, and I don't think you can just reach out and replace it just like that. But I want to know why this should be done.
That's a really excellent question. Eric, can you start off first just talking a little bit about grassland loss and other things that are going on?
Yeah, when you drive across the landscape, you really see there's a lot of grassland loss happening, particularly in the eastern part of the state. As Steve mentioned in his introduction, we're seeing grassland loss rates in North Dakota that are comparable to that of the Dust Bowl years. And one other thing I'd mention relative to that, right now every federal conservation program that's offered in North Dakota is oversubscribed. I mean, there's much more demand for those programs than what those programs can keep up with. So yeah, this is a program that would be highly used on the landscape.
All right, Steve, other thoughts?
Yeah, and the Water Commission certainly does great work in our state, especially with the hard infrastructure. The real added value that this measure would do is to bring in those buffers to purify the water before it gets to our treatment plants and things like that, so that we can really have a sustainable solution there. And I think what we're really seeing is unprecedented change in our state, change that we have not seen in many years, and therefore we really have to step up our game and step up our solutions to rise to those challenges. So this measure is needed to meet those great demands and those great pressures that we're seeing on our landscape today.
All right. We also have Jim. I'm sorry, Jim, I think I just pushed. There we go. Do you have a question, Jim? I thought I lost you there for a second. Are you there, Jim?
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, go ahead, please.
Yeah, okay. We're sitting here listening to it on the speakerphone, the family, and we wondered if you could summarize briefly what Measure 5 says. We have some smattering of an idea, but could you do that for us?
That's great, and some people have joined later in the call. Thank you very much. And remember, if you want to ask a question, press 0 on your phone. Steve, can you quickly summarize the measure for Jim and others?
Yeah, you bet. So in a nutshell, Measure 5 would dedicate 5% of the existing oil extraction tax into a granting fund for the state of North Dakota. That fund would be available to be used for projects that protect our clean water, that enhance our flood control, that improve fish and wildlife habitat, that enhance outdoor recreation, including opportunities to hunt and fish, and also to provide funding for outdoor education for our children. So the entities that could apply for this funding are our state agencies, our cities and counties, our political subdivisions, and our nonprofit organizations could all apply for grants from this fund. It has a citizen advisory board that would review those grant applications, and then they would make a recommendation to 3 of our highest elected officials, our governor, our attorney general, and our agricultural commissioner, who would make the final decisions on what gets funded every year from this fund. And so that's in a nutshell what this Measure 5 would do.
Okay, thank you very much. I have Noreen, who's calling in now with a question. Noreen Nelson, Norlin Nelson. I apologize for
there
Lina.
You got it.
Oh, sorry about
right. that. You still didn't answer my question about this farmland that's underwater right now and kind of all the rain we had. Are you including that in their reserve program? Because someday them farmers are going to be able to farm that again.
Okay. Did you have an answer for him, Steve?
Well, that would certainly be an opportunity to think about, what could be done with some of that land, and maybe in the short term, it could be rented to store flood water, and then, in the longer term, if the water receded, then, you could look at opportunities to farm it again. So it's really, providing more conservation tools and options for our landowners out there that can work with them to fit into their operations, and also to provide, good habitat, good conservation on the ground at the same time.
Okay. Thank you, Steve. We have Sandy Mack calling in from West Fargo. Sandy, did you have a question?
Yes, Sandy, I did. Our family farmed in the middle of the path of the diversion, the FM diversion, and stand to lose quite a bit of farmland because of that, and I wondered what your stance was on that. We've gone to all the meetings fighting this diversion ever since the idea started. And, of course, they're disrupting a lot of areas. We have never changed the lay of the land here. I live along Drain 14. This goes way back to my grandpa when he first started farming. We've not changed anything, so there's a lot of wildlife that we just let, to raise their young here and live here. And they want to come through and just dig everything out and just make a huge mess. And it goes over the aquifer that takes care of all the rural water people. And they're using a very old study from NDSU. They chose not to do a new study to see what it would do to the groundwater. What is your stance on all of that situation on this end of the state?
Steve, do you have an answer for that?
Yes, Andy. So, this committee has not taken any stance on the Fargo diversion, and we wouldn't expect to. But I think you've highlighted some good concerns there. Is what are the options with that? I mean, as a granting fund, it would be available for groups working in that area to offer some programs that could compensate for any loss of habitat that you might incur on your property, or some way to really provide a working lands option for some of the things going on there. But there's no regulatory authority with this fund. There's there's no ability of this fund to get involved in litigation or lobbying. Those are all prohibited. So this is this is simply a granting fund for voluntary incentive-based conservation. So in whatever role that that could play in the Fargo situation, it would certainly be available to help with landowners like yourself.
Now, I think I may have cut off my friend Clarence Bina, who had a question, but I'll tell you what his question was, or at least what the description was, is there's some concern out there about this measure taking dollars away from schools and other needs out there. Steve, why don't you talk a little bit about that and help people out on that one?
Yeah, thank you, Becky. That's absolutely not true. That is a concern that's been raised, I think, to try to scare people. If you look at the financial position that our state is in, it's estimated in the next biennium, 2015 to 2017, that North Dakota will receive $10 billion in oil and gas tax revenue in the next biennium. This measure would allocate 5% of the extraction tax, 3% of the overall tax into this fund for conservation. So our state has at its disposal $9.75 billion to address the other needs in the state. So we can and we should address the needs we have with education and infrastructure and conservation. And it's not a matter of having the money, it's a matter of do we have the will to do that.
Okay, thank you. And we do have a few people waiting to talk, but I do want to remind others that if you have a question, press 0 to ask your question. I want to go now to Al Geisen, one of our volunteers, to tell us a little bit about his volunteer experience, and then we'll talk a little bit about volunteering that some of the needs that we have right now. Al?
Well, thanks, Becky. Good evening, everybody. I volunteered basically in two ways. First, starting about a year ago, I began collecting signatures in support of the petition. And this turned out to be a very positive experience because approximately 70% of the individuals I approached signed the petition. And of those who didn't sign the petition, they just wanted more time to research what the petition was about. And that's very understandable. In order to get the petition on the ballot, we needed approximately 27,000 signatures, and we ended up with almost 40,000 signatures that were accepted by the Secretary of State's office, and that is a credit to many volunteers who work throughout the state. It was really a team effort. And the second way I volunteered was to write 3 or 4 letters to the editor. I wrote letters to the Bismarck, Fargo, Grand Forks, and Jamestown papers explaining why North Dakota needs this amendment. Becky?
All right. Thank you so much. That's great. And there's lots of volunteer opportunities out there right now. We have people who are on phone banks calling people about this measure. Some folks are going door to door. There'll be more opportunities in the future to help people understand a little bit more about this measure. Remember, if you want to commit to volunteering tonight, press 1 if you want to volunteer. Press 2 if you'll talk to your friends and family. That's probably the easiest thing to do, and something, your friends and family should know that you support this. Press 3 if you'll talk to your coworkers about voting for Measure 5, and press 4 to commit to doing all 3. So you can do that right now, and if you want to ask a question, please press 0 and be part of this call tonight, just like Bryce Nelson. Bryce, do you have a question? Hi, Bryce. I made you wait a little while. Are you still out there with your question?
I still am.
Okay, good.
I was asking. I want to find out about how the funds will be distributed. I work in engineering, and a lot of the time with oil impact grants, all the money seems to go to everything on the hubs on the western side of the state. So Williston, Newtown, Stanley, Tioga, Ray, and Minot get everything, and then nothing seems to really get, or a very small amount gets, distributed in other places. Will there be some kind of, measures to be put into this to kind of stop that from happening, or is this going to still be one of the oil impact counties that are going to get majority of the funds?
Well, that's a great question, Bryce, and certainly one that we get asked a lot. Steve, do you want to provide an answer for that one?
Yeah, it is a really good question, Bryce. So the measure does not specify any geographic distribution of funds. Our thinking there was that it's hard to really predict what future needs will be, so we wanted to leave the advisory committee and the commission with the ability to move funds around to meet the most pressing needs in the state. So it'll really be up to that Citizen Advisory Committee and the commission of the Governor, Attorney General, and the Ag Commissioner to decide what those priorities are. But we do, we have collected needs from around the state. Certainly there's urgent needs out in western North Dakota. There's also needs across the state to deal with flooding and habitat needs around the state. So our expectation is that this money will be utilized across North Dakota to meet the various challenges we have with clean water, wildlife, and parks in this state.
All right, thanks, Steve. We're going to go to a couple more callers here, but and remember, if you want to ask a question, press 0. But I have another poll for you, and I'd like you to participate if you would. Do you plan to vote for Measure 5, which will dedicate 5% of existing oil and gas taxes to protect North Dakota's wildlife and clean water? If you do, press 1 if you will vote for Measure 5. Press 2 if you will not vote for Measure 5. Press 3 if you're undecided. Once again, that's press 1 if you will vote for Measure 5. Press 2 if you will not vote for Measure 5. Press 3 if you're undecided. Now remember, if you want to ask a question, press 0, just as Alan did. Go ahead, Alan, in Fargo.
One of the arguments that I've been hearing from Farm Bureau, North Dakota Farm Bureau, and North Dakota Farmers Union is that this money, this fund, will be used to buy up land to take out of production from farmers, and so that's why those two groups are opposing, or one of the reasons at least, that two groups are opposing this this measure. And I just wondered, is that part of the program to buy land from farmers to take out of production?
Thank you so much for asking that, because that certainly does come up a lot. Eric, can you talk about that one and then maybe Steve a little bit?
Well, this measure does allow for acquisition of land, however, that's not the intent of the measure. It's for acquisition for parks and public recreation areas. We should also note that in North Dakota, there's some very, very strict laws on nonprofits regarding acquisition of land. And so essentially any type of acquisition would need the approval of the governor, the attorney general, and the agricultural commissioner to get funding approved for that. So is there the possibility that a park could be added? Possibly, but that's not the sole intent of this measure.
Thank you so much. Steve, anything to add to that?
No, I think Eric covered it really well, and I mean we're very confident that our three highest elected officials, the governor, attorney general, and the ag commissioner, will manage the use of these funds very prudently and will prevent any big negative impacts to agriculture or energy. So we think that concern is really misplaced, and we have a lot of faith in those elected officials to manage those funds well.
All right. Thank you very much. I have a fourth poll for folks, and remember to press 0 if you'd like to ask a question. You may have a question that's come up during this call. If you would like to volunteer, remember to press 1. Press 2 if you'd like to talk to your friends and family about voting for the measure. Press 2 if you talk to coworkers about voting for Measure 5. And press 4 to commit to do all 3. So, if you go ahead and do that, and we will also talk then to Harry from Jamestown. Harry, are you on the line? Are you still there, Harry?
Yep, I'm here.
Okay, all right, thanks. Go ahead, Harry.
What is the stance for the North Dakota Corn Growers Association and the farm groups on this measure?
All right, Steve, do you have an answer for that and basically how farmers feel about this?
Yeah, it's interesting. Certainly, some of the farm lobbyist positions are to oppose this measure for the reason the gentleman mentioned previously. We do see a disconnect between that position and what we see out on the ground between farmers and ranchers that we all work with on a daily basis. So we have many farmers and ranchers that are supporting this measure individually and that are eager to see more conservation programs offered to them to help with their operations.
All right. Along that line, it's one of the questions that comes up, Steve, is who can apply for this, and will farmers and ranchers be able to apply separately, or how is this going to work?
Yeah, good question, Becky. So individuals themselves cannot apply to this. So it would need to be an organization, and that's really due to the fiscal and contractual accountability that you would have to receive a grant from the state of North Dakota. But we certainly expect a lot of the agricultural groups to submit grant proposals to help meet any conservation and water issues that are being faced by both farmers and ranchers out there on the landscape. So, as the gentleman mentioned, the corn growers and the Farm Bureau and other organizations like that can certainly submit applications to this to help with things like dealing with farm runoff, to provide watering systems and grazing systems for livestock. So there's just really tremendous opportunities for this to benefit our agricultural producers in the state of North Dakota.
Steve, can you talk a little bit about how the decisions will be made, about the advisory committee and who makes the ultimate decision?
Yeah, you bet, Becky. So the way this will work is that the commission will issue a request for proposal several times throughout the year. Those proposals will go into the 13-member advisory commission, which will be one of the most diverse boards in the entire state. It includes members from conservation backgrounds, those from Parks and Recreation, members from agriculture, members from energy. It includes 4 legislators that would serve on that panel, and also a member of our tribes in North Dakota. That 13-member advisory committee would review the slate of projects and make recommendations to the governor, the ag commissioner, and attorney general, who then would have final say on which projects were funded and not. And this is really a great system to create a strong public-private partnership between our citizens and our elected officials to help make sure that we're accountable to each other and make sure that there's a good system of checks and balances in place.
All right, thanks, Steve. We do have a couple people on the line with questions, but if you have a question, go ahead. There's no dumb questions here. Please press 0. We've had some really good ones tonight. If you've had that nagging question, please go ahead and press 0 and ask our panel of experts. One more poll, and now this is a fun one. What do you think is the best thing that Measure 5 will do for North Dakotans? Press 1 if it's creating more parks and recreation areas for hunting and fishing. So that's 1 for more parks and recreation. Press 2 if it's protecting the water in our rivers, lakes, and streams. Press 3 if it's protecting our communities from flooding. Press 4 if it's all three. If you can't decide, that's fine. So 1 for parks and recreation areas, 2 for protecting water, clean water in rivers, lakes, and streams, and 3 if it's flood control that you're concerned about. If you're concerned about all 4 and you think this would be the best thing that Measure 4 would do, or all 3, I think it is, press 4 if you think it's all 3, just to confuse you a little bit there. Now, remember, if you want to ask a question, press 0. Here's Jeff from Fargo. You have a question about land. I think we talked about this a little bit, but go ahead, Jeff.
Well, I'm just curious if any of the funds will be used for direct land acquisition. I understand there's some controversy regarding taking farmland and whatnot out of production, but I'm a lifetime supporter of Ducks Unlimited, Pheasants Forever, that type of thing. Have got a strong conservational interest, and hoping that there is some funds from this amendment would be used to purchase some lands to set aside for my grandchildren to enjoy hunting and that type of thing. Thank you all. Listen for the answer.
Thank you. Thanks for waiting, too. Steve?
Yeah, thanks for the question, Jeff. The measure would allow for land acquisitions. The real thinking behind that is that we need to have places like you mentioned for people to recreate, be they wildlife management areas where people can hunt and fish, or new city and state parks where we can get our families outdoors. So we certainly do expect some land acquisition for those types of areas, but you shouldn't take that to the extreme to think that this will be large scale or anything that will have a real impact on agriculture. I don't think we could find ag economists that would tell you that conservation acquisition has a significant impact on agricultural land prices. So those fears are overextended, and the commission we have great faith in to manage this properly, to allow for acquisitions that are well supported by local communities, but not to let that get out of control in any way. So.
All right. Thank you very much. We also have a call from Casey. Casey, can you go ahead, please?
Yep. I was wondering, I hear the direct opportunity for anybody in every organization that wants to, but I'm wondering if there's actually anybody who has anything on the table ready to use these funds and ready to make these grants. Who's your go-to people that are looking to use this money? Is it more for the lakes, streams, and waters? Is it more for the land conservation? More for the clean water? Who's really out there really trying to get these funds available?
That's a great question, Casey. There's certainly people with, since we started this process, people have had lots of ideas and have come up with interesting projects for North Dakota. Steve, do you want to talk about some of those?
Yeah, and so Casey, I don't know if there's a particular group that is any more eager and interested than any other. We've certainly seen with the small fund that's available right now, great interest among park districts, great interest among North Dakota Game and Fish, North Dakota Parks and Rec to access those funds. We've seen strong interest between our soil and water conservation districts, and also from the nonprofit organizations like Ducks Unlimited and Pheasants Forever and Delta Waterfowl, and those type of organizations to use those funds. So I think the interest is really broad, and that's one advantage of this measure, is that it allows us to address a broad scope of conservation and resource concerns in our state.
All right. Thanks so much for that. I'm going to give you one more chance, being that we're talking about this, to give us some ideas about what you think is the most important thing that Measure 5 could do for North Dakota. So press 1 if it's creating more parks and recreation. Press 2 if it's protecting the water in our rivers, lakes, and streams, and press 3 if it's protecting our communities from flooding, or press 4 if it's all 3. Steve, one of the things too that I did get a question about today is about the water. How would you go about accomplishing flood control and clean water and all the things that would relate to water? That's been of great interest. I think lots of people care about clean water above all.
Yeah, thanks, Becky. So, one of the most effective solutions that we've seen in North Dakota to the chronic flooding that we face is the greenway that Grand Forks constructed after their terrible flood and fires, where they actually went in along the river and they developed a park system in the floodplain and moved buildings and infrastructure out of harm's way. And so during low water times, it allows a place for people to hike and bike and enjoy being outdoors. And then when the river comes up every spring, like it typically does, that park can be flooded, but our people's homes and businesses and their lifestyles are out of harm's way. And there's a great need for similar type projects in places like Minot and Bismarck and Valley City and Jamestown and even our smaller communities. So, this measure would provide the funding to allow those communities to respond in a similar way to Grand Forks to really alleviate some of their flooding issues on a more long-term basis like Grand Forks has done.
Thank you so much. Now, Eric, you're out there by Cross Ranch, and what are you seeing happening around you in terms of, is there habitat loss happening in your area?
Well, definitely when you travel the state, particularly the eastern part of the state, we're seeing great amounts of grasslands and wetlands that are leaving the landscape. So there's definitely a need out there for this type of thing, to work with the farmers and ranchers and landowners to keep those grasslands and wetlands out there.
All right. Thank you so much. I have a call from James Miller. James, are you out there?
Yes, I am.
Go ahead, please.
Okay, well, I have a couple of questions. First of all, I'm wondering, have other states in this region done anything similar, or are we sort of the first? That's one question. The other question is that we hear a lot about all of these so-called out-of-state special interest groups that are going to kidnap this money and use it for some nefarious special purpose. Who are those special groups? Who are we dealing with here?
All right. Okay. Thanks. Well, first of all, Steve, talk about other things that have happened in other states. Are we the first?
Yeah. We're not. This is a proven model across our great nation. 33 other states have dedicated funds for conservation. Those have come from a variety of sources. Some have used a portion of their sales tax revenue. Some have used a portion of their lottery proceeds, and some have used a portion of their oil and gas tax revenue. Alabama has done that. Wyoming has done that. So this is a proven model. It has worked very well. Typically what we see over time is that after the measure has been in place for a while, when we repoll the citizens, the support increases over time. And so we expect the same thing in North Dakota. This will be a wonderful tool for our state to maintain our great quality of life and our outdoor heritage. So, some of these fears that people have never been realized in these other states. They have strong economies, a strong energy and agriculture and conservation, and those things can go hand in hand very well, and we know they will in North Dakota as well.
Can you talk a little bit about the North Dakota participation in this and those concerns about out-of-state interests?
Yeah, that's a good question as well. So, this has been a tremendous grassroots effort in our state. There were 500 volunteers that signed up to help collect signatures and to work on the campaign. I think, as Eric mentioned earlier, we had 41,000 North Dakotans that signed the petition. We're currently up to 250 organizations, small businesses, and teachers and healthcare professionals that have endorsed the measure. So it's very strongly a North Dakota grassroots effort. We have also put in place some safeguards to prevent anything bad from happening, like has been troubling some people. And I'll give you some examples. The measure strictly prohibits any of these funds from being used outside of our state, so they cannot be transported out of North Dakota. It strictly prohibits the funds being used for any litigation activity, so we don't have to worry about out-of-state groups coming in using this money to do any type of lawsuits. That's strictly prohibited. And it also can't be used for lobbying, so it's not going to be used for groups to come in and try to change the laws within North Dakota. So it is very much a grassroots effort, and the groups like my group, Ducks Unlimited, that is involved in this, has been in North Dakota for 50 years. We've had our regional office here for 30 years, and our very first project in the United States was right here by Lake Arena. So, this is very much a North Dakota-led and developed effort.
Okay, we're about coming to the end of our time, and we're going to ask you again about committing to volunteer if you want to do that, another poll. But first, Al Geisen, if you're not sleeping over there, because I've left you alone for a long time, but I just, tell us why you keep showing up and why you continue to volunteer to make sure that this measure passes. I mean, I think you say yes to just about everything that's asked of you. Why is that?
Well, I'll tell you, Becky, I lived in 7 different states, Minnesota, Colorado, Alaska, Virginia, Texas, and Michigan. And my wife and I are originally from North Dakota, and we couldn't hardly wait to get back 10 years ago. And the reason for that is because of the environment here in North Dakota. It's because of the people, and it's because of the wildlife. It's because of the fishing potential and whatnot. It certainly wasn't because of the winters, but that's the reason and everything. And you take a look at our landowners and everything, our producers, our farmers, and our ranchers. They're some of the most generous people in the world. You realize that North Dakota is the only state that does not have an automatic trespassing law. In other words, if a piece of agricultural land is not posted, you can go and hunt. And so the opportunities for hunting and fishing and outdoor activities is just unbelievable. And again, I speak from experience from living in these other states. So when I'm asked to help out, I couldn't be happier to do it. And I want to see preserved what we have right now.
Thank you so much, Alan. Thanks for all that you do, and thank you all for coming to the call. Again, if you want to, if you will volunteer, please press 1. Press 2 if you'll talk to your friends and family. Press 3 if you'll talk to your coworkers, and 4 to commit to do all 3. Now, Steve, can you give us a few final comments before we say goodnight?
You bet, Becky. I just want to thank everybody for your time and attention on the call tonight. This is really a historic step in North Dakota's conservation journey, and we thank you all for what you're doing to help maintain the great quality of life that we have in this state. And finally, I just want to say don't forget to vote yes on 5 come November 4th.
Yes, and fill out your ballot all the way to the bottom. That's what happens sometimes with measures like this. People stop and they don't go all the way to the bottom. So be sure to get to 5 and vote yes on 5. Thank you so much all for participating, for people who called in, and just for listening in tonight. Thank you so much, and vote yes on 5. Good night.